Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds talk. For Tile Update 4, we have our first Arch Tempered monster drop already. It's Jin Dahaad. So it's time once again to take a look at the weapon rankings and see how the speedrunners are doing and see what it can tell us in regards to the power of the weapons. As always, take it with a heavy grain of salt, but it does give us a general look at speedrunning strats, interesting details, and yeah, how things are standing. Now, normally in these videos, we don't allow heroics because obviously it has a heavy influence on the power of the weapon. And while I would have done that this time as well, something interesting has happened with the runners. A lot of them are using heroics. Runners that have never used it before or would often post runs without it are using it. So for a couple of these, we will actually have heroics as we'll discuss. And I'll do a little comparison at the end to show you how the heroics runners are stacking up as an interesting comparison for the weapon rankings. But I think this might be happening because of things like, talismans being able to be really efficient with heroics, but also the transcend feature, enhancing earlier pieces with better decoration slots, making them more viable to work into sets. First up then we have bow, with what is probably not like the most accurate showing for the weapon. This is a 13 minute and 17 second clear, so definitely noticeably behind other weapons as we're going to get through. So yeah, I don't think this is a proper representation of what's possible for the bow, and it is interesting off the back of how insanely good bow did in the Jin Dahaad fight. Where, to be fair, element hit zones were unbelievable, plus the bow buffs that came with Tile Update 4. It made things look really good for the bow, and I do think it's in a much better place now. Interestingly, the only thing that I've seen from, say, your top speedrunners with bow is posts about how there's a lot of RNG involved in this run, and how it's quite frustrating. But hopefully we'll get some proper bow runs in the coming days. But this run is still going to be a great starting point for you guys learning the fight with bow. But now a run that kind of fits where its placement is, we have Lance with 10 minutes and 22 seconds. This is off the back of the buffs to Lance, but obviously some big updates for this weapon come in the form of counter-attack playstyle and the triple poke buff that was Sin. What's interesting about this run for me is seeing whether the runner is able to do exactly this. Break specific parts, get the knockdowns, then go to the relevant highlighted hit zones, the back, the head, and break apart Jin, which is what you're trying to do throughout the fight. A lot of weapons are going to be able to do this immediately. Some are going to have to do some charging up and then go for these hit zones. But in regards to Lance and its lower output compared to other weapons on average, it does make me wonder, well, if that's what's holding it back. Speedrunners will use different techniques and efficiencies then to really pick up the pace, such as we see this double bomb here right under the boulder. So it's like a double explosion on the correct part, then the drop of the boulder, then we get back to the head. Really efficient stuff. But I do think the Lance is still being held back by the fact that it doesn't have, as high output as the other weapons. But I am finding Lance is in a much better position after Tile Update 4. Next up then we have our first sub 10 minute run with Hammer with a 9 minute and 37 second clear run. This opening is interesting to me because we're seeing rock steady mantle instead of say corrupting mantle or something that's going to increase your DPS. You want to get through phase 1 as fast as possible. And there's this issue with one of his moves where he does this kind of fridge freezer around himself, and that forces, it depends on the weapon you're using, but melee weapons to back out. Maybe it's a counter or a guard or whatever, but if you don't have something like that, you've got to back out. And Hammer doesn't exactly have that. So, cleverly using Rocksteady Mantle to ignore it right there and stay on those front arms, get the early knockdown, then straight to the head. Another aspect of this is obviously the KO build up, the great ability to just bonk the head. Is that going to be a reliable thing in this fight? Are you going to be able to constantly hit the head efficiently, effectively to maximize? But this is what we're looking for here. Before too long, we see a very quick KO there with all that stagger build up thanks to the blunt damage to the head. And then you get a DPS window that plenty of other weapons just aren't going to get, which is nice to see. One other small reference as well is this attack here, Spinning Bludgeon. Something that we saw a lot in, say, the Hammer speedruns for GOG was a ton of Spinning Bludgeon for that ticking damage in those brief windows we actually get to hit. But maybe more against standard, if we can call Jin Dahaad a standard monster. You have the time to do the wind-ups and you can actually reach the head with most of the attacks. Anyway, definitely going to be a good one to watch if you want to learn some efficiencies and how to properly run the Hammer against Jin Dahaad in this Arch Tempered version. Right, next up we have Heavy Bowgun with a 9 minute and 18 second clear. We're almost at the sub 9 minute time already. We have a nice ranged weapon here with fire element between the shots and that free ability to just shoot the head, as we can see. Bit of evasive gameplay going on. Instead of going for the perfect guard to stop the roll, it's just a roll. But this is what I was thinking about when it comes to ranged weapons. We have that AoE freeze attack where you have to guard it or counter it or just get out of it as melee weapon. The ranged weapons can just stand there and maintain DPS. What I would expect to see is a lot of DPS on a single body part without like losing track of it, and specifically being on head and the front arms because of that. We also see as we transition into phase 2 that they're just hitting the monster as it walks by. Melee weapon would have to be in the correct place or chasing it, but a ranged weapon can just get straight to DPS while it specifically paths where it's got to stop and go to continue the fight. And what I found interesting was how long it took before the gauge was being used. It was until, say, the first proper knockdown where they're doing these unbelievably satisfying shots through the length of this long, wormy monster. It's just so awesome to see piercing shots of that get such immense value, and it forces phase 2 to end so suddenly because it's just so much damage going through the body. So cool. Next up then we have light bowgun with a 9 minute and 7 second clear, which surprises me because I do feel like the potential of this weapon is higher, but it's not like this run is a bad run in any version of that meaning. It's really efficient, this phase 1. It's like ridiculously efficient. So what they've got is Rocksteady Mantle, which is a surprise because you think Corrupted Mantle is something for DPS, but either way, they carefully position so they get an early attachment on the hind leg there, then stand at the foreleg so they can sort of shoot through the foreleg and into the back leg at the same time. We have an early wound opening on the hind leg. It's really efficient stuff. We're doing like the gauge dumping in that moment as well. And now we're hitting head. There's this kind of slam attack here, which allows them to back up a tiny bit, reload, and then just absolutely dump the last bit of their gauge into their head. But it's still a 9 minute and 7 second clear, which is surprising to me because obviously light bowgun is a top performer of the weapons for sure. Its element outputs incredible, the ranged ability to ignore the attacks like we've been talking about with heavy bowgun, and then just apply optimal DPS at the correct hit zone. I mean, it's just satisfying as hell to watch. Next up then we have gunlance with a pretty respectable 9 minutes and 3 seconds, but it's interesting to see. This is without heroics, of course, right? We tried to look at that, but the heroics run by comparison, top run right now as I make this video, is 6 minutes and 27 seconds, which is a massive jump forward. So I did wonder about gunlance with a fight like this, where we have these hit zones that we're really trying to work down, we're trying to break those. So with shelling, you know, you can ignore the hit zones and do great DPS without worrying about these things. So I wondered how gunlance would do. Interestingly, in this run, phase 1 doesn't go that well. Taking a couple hits, things go a bit wrong. There's some inefficiencies like actually getting frozen there and then having to deal with it. But to be fair, you see how they're running binding counter. That's the Jin Dahaad 2 set. You get a big raw increase with just the first one. I believe it's 25 raw there for I think 90 seconds. So it's actually awesome as a buff there to get frozen intentionally. It otherwise triggers off clashes, and that's definitely not going to happen that quickly here. So jumping forward to the setup of phase 2, we see what the lance player did as well, setting up 2 barrel bombs at the actual boulder drop. I also noticed that, yep, again, Rocksteady Mantle instead of Corrupting Mantle for actual increase of DPS. It's interesting, but if you have longer animations and you're just looking to go toe-to-toe, then fair enough, it actually will result in more efficient results. I think for a normal player, Rocksteady Mantle is that kind of crutch that more people should really think about leaning on, because God is it helpful with the damage reduction. Next up we have Longsword, and it's always been one of my favourite weapons to watch for speedrunning just because of how slick it is. This is an 8 minute and 27 second clear, but we do have a faster clear with heroics, which is 6 minutes and 23, putting it towards the top. So Longsword is certainly doing well in this fight, even if it's more towards the middle of the pack with this current run. Despite that, it's an incredibly satisfying run. The fact that they're able to open for free with a charged spirit gauge attack to get up a level. Obviously, you got the counter attacks for the different attacks. The fact that we can now special sheath and hold the stance for longer plays a small role there in that moment when they're holding for that roll. Then they counter another roll that follows up and get straight into a knockdown where they're going to the head. Little slick stuff where we're turning the focus mode on and off, allowing you to carefully position, and you do actually see Helmbreaker. This is just to really do maximum DPS to the head here and force the transition into phase 2 with the most DPS possible. I love the really slick quick sheath counter on the raw as it gets up after that Helmbreaker, so they actually managed to get back to red gauge for the start of phase 2. I was about to say, like, that's really cool and I get like pushing it into phase 2, but then you're like down to yellow if you're quick at best. No, they're back to red gauge immediately. This is not the absolute perfect run. A couple things do go wrong. I think 8 minutes and less is easily possible for Longsword. Moving on, we now have dual blades with a very respectable 7 minutes and 57 second clear, so just barely sub 8 minutes. And it's what you should expect from dual blades. It is these really quick combos, great burst at the correct hit zone, working at one limb until we get the proper knockdown and flowing through the combat from the perfect evades, getting the demon boost mode going and maintaining it. It's honestly pretty bread and butter standard stuff, where I've seen some really cool stuff from dual blades against certain monsters like Gog. Honestly, this is just pure DPS at the ideal hit zone most of the time. But to be fair, there was a couple interesting speedrunning things that were happening in later phases, like the fact that they're using barrel bombs to get the demon boost mode active again after a down period where they've not been able to actually get it, or say the fact that they're using flash pods to blind Jin Dahaad, not to say interrupt it or CC it, but to just blind it to make its moveset pattern a bit more predictable and manageable for a little bit. Then obviously also using traps to extend DPS windows. It is very efficient stuff and a great run to check out for dual blades players. Our next weapon then is Sword and Shield with a very respectable 7 minutes and 46 second clear. So it's our first sub 8 and we actually use Corrupted Mantle, woohoo. So it's a sneak attack into a familiar opening where the SNS is going straight to one of the forelegs and then slowly moving around the target, using of course the perfect guard to ignore any roars and any and all attacks that they can. This is a familiar tale then because it's what we're seeing for SNS for lots of fights at this point, where it's really effective output with the correct element matching. We get an early stagger here and they just sort of smoothly flow over to the head the whole time attacking, where there's a little bit of downtime for other weapons, you know, to move to the ideal hit zone, then get going. It's just permanent. So SNS doing very well and being one of the top runs for this, it just makes sense. And based on this run and how it goes, I'd probably suggest it is a great weapon to learn the fight in general. Right, we have an interesting situation with this next run. This is Switch X with a 7 minute and 36 second clear, but I have to give you a disclaimer. They are using heroics, which is something we normally wouldn't cover, but it's like the only relevant run we have for Switch X to look at. Switch X has had some incredible changes in this update, and it's much more about sword mode and a lot less about spamming full release, though that's obviously still important. The opening here is cool as hell. It's a quick sword attack with a barrel bomb down to counter to quickly get some great DPS and a lot of amp. Then very quickly we're going to counter the next roar, which already has them amped, and they're able to get to the foreleg and start going. Then we're seeing a bit of sword gameplay, but interestingly they're clearly fishing and baiting for an offset to get a nice big smack there, big burst of over 1,000 damage by the way at the head. Then they use the full release to hyper armor through the roar. Really slick and efficient stuff. We get a very early wound, which is usually what you use to kind of bully the target, then get into a full release, but instead they power up the axe mode and then get into a full release anyway at the knockdown at the head. So quite unique stuff. The big explosion underneath itself, easy sword counter, not even much skill in it. The beautiful thing about the sword counter is how you can evade out of it. So there for the double slam, they're not trapped in this long awkward animation. They're able to evade out of it for the second counter straight away. So I gotta give them full props for using the new kit or Switch X, which is a lot more varied. Anyway, it all leads into an incredibly efficient phase 1 and 2, where they intentionally take a hit as Jin transitions into phase 3. It's really clever stuff. This puts them low health to trigger heroics, and then they're nicely already on the sacred moving ahead of Jin, getting in position for the third area. So whether the fact that they're using heroics or not is impacting the rankings, of course, this is still incredible Switch X gameplay and the new kind of meta that exists with the new options that are solid now. Well worth watching. Next up then we have Greatsword, and again we've got another caveat here that the Greatsword runners are all doing, well, heroics runs, and you can see why. It's a clever opening here where they're using the bail set to hurt themselves and quickly get heroics activated before they even get going. As I was making this video, there is now this very impressive 9 minute and 27 second clear by Greatsword as well, without heroics, but this is just barely sub 10. I do think, you know, there's more potential for Greatsword here outside of heroics, but just a quick acknowledgement of that, and certainly a good alternative run to check out. Anyway, interesting thing with Greatsword and the buffs that it saw for Title Day 4 is the improvements to the full true/combo, and seeing more of that in the general gameplay. With a monster that's a bit slower like Jin Dahaad, I expect to see more of that, but I never get tired of seeing how Greatsword has actually adopted the bail set, and the fact that we're seeing that self-damage and resentment being used in an effective and relevant way. The visuals of those like purple slices, so cool. But the careful thing about Greatsword is that you want to be doing tackles and taking a bit of chip damage here and there. So it does surprise me that heroics runs are so popular amongst greatswords for Jin. Even not technically mistakes where you go for those tackles, it could just kill you. But anyway, it's an incredibly fast phase 1. I think that's the fastest one we've looked at today because of that full setup. We do not see the familiar barrel setup into the drop, but we do see a flinch that gets the boulder close enough for the drop straight into the big massive slams again at the head. Unlike everyone else, we see a very early trap usage to then allow for that longer combo, get the true charge combo off fully and break the leg, leading into again yet another knockdown super early. So this is absolute domination of the monster in the opening section. So another one that I'd strongly recommend if you want to learn the fight with this weapon, with greatsword in specific. Moving on to our next weapon then, we have Charge Blade with a pretty incredible time here. 7 minutes and 14 seconds without heroics is awesome. There is a heroics run that exists that's slightly faster with a 6:55 right now, but that's a surprisingly close gap between the heroics and non-heroics versions. Anyway, important though is that they use Rocksteady, like we've seen quite a few runs today, just to completely ignore what the monster's doing. This is important because the morph loop combo, as quick as it can be and faster with Title of Day 4, especially with the hit stop that's been changed, it's still a long combo where we see there an ice breath comes out, they just ignore it to get the AD off, and then the follow-up just smacking the correct hit zone, pushing this into phase 2 as quickly as possible. Interestingly, we actually see an ED2 there into an AD into the follow-up, where before we would just see the AED morph loop combo. Unlike most Charge Blade users as well, they actually take the time to buff up the sword as well. Since we have this moment of transition as Jin's going to the next area, might as well, right? Just something you don't really see. It's not going to add a lot of damage, but here and there between the morph loop, you do go into the sword and shield, maybe you're charging up some vials, makes those parts stronger, so why not if you can? I did wonder whether we would see any SAD in this fight. Obviously, compared to something like GOG, the fire weakness that Jin has isn't remotely as high, but the element numbers you're reaching are absolutely insane for Charge Blade in this update, able to yet reach the new cap that they raised. So SAD is very powerful in the current context, and with a big target like, Jin Dahaad, I thought maybe we might see it. But it seems like a lot of AD into the follow-up, that familiar combo that's just so fast and efficient. But really, this is an absolute pummeling of Jin Dahaad, which explains the incredible time, again, without heroics. Next up then, this one's blown me away. It's Insect Glaive with a 6 minute 58 second clear. Familiar towards what we saw at the beginning of Wilds, where Insect Glaive was just so dominating. But how and why is it so far above so many weapons? Without heroics as well, by the way, a sub 7 minute is insane. Well, it's a really efficient gathering of the essence and essence dump at the head. As usual, Insect Glaive does so well when that descending slash can go up through an ideal hit zone. So they're just like powering up, charging up, using the basic small movement forward there to position under the chin of Jin and then go straight up into it. That is an unbelievably quick transition to phase 2, and nothing like special happened. And then very quickly during this knockdown, it's gathering of essence, and then as it gets up, it's that effective use of the descending slash while it's getting up. Important because it doesn't matter if it's a really strong attack if you're wasting even a little bit of the many individual hits of that attack. Maybe it even backfire if you used it when it's fully on the ground like that and you want to wait until it gets up. I have noticed that this player is holding off on using it until it gets up. And I do note that they just do a quick repeating combo and then go up across the arm as the phase is ending. Probably because they're forced to rather than that's like the most efficient thing they could have done. So yes, overall, absolutely ludicrous time for the Insect Glaive. Clearly Jin is just a great one for Insect Glaive if you're making sure to maximize the descending to go up into the head, just like so. But now we get to Hunting Horn with an incredible 6 minute and 49 second clear. So sub 7 minutes has proven to be some of the top runs that exist right now without heroics. But Hunting Horn does achieve a sub 6 minute with the heroics run, so it's still doing unbelievable there. It's clearly your top weapon for output with the right setup. Speaking of setup then, how does this go? Well, we get a sneak attack that causes a flinch, and then there's quite a long time for Jin to get going. So there's a setup of 1, 2, 3 echo bubbles all in the same spot, then carefully positioning to start smacking that front left arm, which is what we see most people do, and then we have this incredibly satisfying moment with resounding there, where you see all those ticks go through the body and reverberate across the bubbles, kind of reminding me of the gauge dump of heavy bowgun piercing through the length of the monster at the specific opportune time. So he gets ahead of Jin very quickly here to begin setting up those echo bubbles beforehand, where, you know, we're seeing the barrel drops by comparison. So it's only like, I think 1 bubble was set up there, but it's enough as we get a wound break at the head and then just absolute bullying here for interrupting and staggering. With the wound break though, you're able to quickly set up another bubble, then careful positioning for the double belly slam to be near the hind legs to move back in towards the center. That's when we see the next wound open for an easy 3rd bubble setup. Very efficient stuff because they're now all down as we get this knockdown to go into the back break there. So definitely a great run to watch if you're looking at Hunting Horn and wondering how do you set up to maximize DPS, how do you position against certain attacks. As usual, that's a great reason to watch speedruns, but this is just really slick stuff in specific. An incredible run, incredible time, go check it out. But now a quick comparison with the heroics list. We know that Switch Axe had a 736 with heroics, and Greatsword had a 723. But with heroics, Charge Blade wasn't like that far ahead, with 6 minutes and 55. It was weapons like gunlance that made a massive jump forward with his 627 compared to their like 9 minute without, or longsword with his 623. Though I do think, you know, longsword could do really well if more runners weren't using heroics and practicing that. Hunting Horn is the biggest one though. Already a top contender, right, with their 649 with no heroics, but then a 547 with heroics cutting off a full minute. So maybe like a 5 minute is possible, or sub 5 minute. It's kind of crazy. But in conclusion, it goes to show that these Arch Tempered fights that they're doing, from New Udra to Jin Dahaad, they're taking a bit longer than your 2 or 3 minute hunts of the past. That's nice to see as a bit of an increase of difficulty and health in general. I am hopeful they're going to do something special for Arch Tempered Arkveld though, but until then we'll have to wait and see. As always, please check out the description or go check out these runners. Watch the runs, learn how to maximize your weapons better in the gameplay. They're just cool to see. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.